The screen door slammed and your feet were already moving toward the kitchen. She had something waiting. It never cost much, sometimes nothing at all, but it filled you up in ways store-bought snacks never could. Here are 30 cheap snacks black mothers made that 1960s kids begged for. Cinnamon sugar toast was the first snack most black kids learned to make alone, standing on a chair to reach the counter. The bread had to be white and soft enough to hold the butter without tearing. You spread it thick all the way to the edges because bare corners were unacceptable. Then came the cinnamon and sugar from a jar that lived next to the stove, the ratio known only to whoever filled it. The toast went under the broiler, never in a toaster, and you watched through the oven door until the sugar bubbled and the edges turned dark gold. You ate it standing up, burning your fingers, licking the grit off your thumb. It cost pennies, took 3 minutes, and the smell alone could pull every kid in the house out of hiding. Nobody sells it, nobody orders it, but that smell takes you straight back to a kitchen where the oven was always warm. Frozen Kool-Aid cups turned a 5-cent packet of drink mix into a summer business that kept entire blocks buzzing. Every neighborhood had a house where somebody's mama filled Dixie cups with Kool-Aid, stuck in popsicle sticks, and sold them off the porch for a dime. Cherry was the best seller. Grape ran second. Tropical punch was for the bold. You mixed it stronger than the packet said, doubled the sugar, poured slow so the stick stayed centered while the cups froze overnight. By noon, kids lined up on the sidewalk with coins earned sweeping porches or returning bottles. The trick was peeling the cup without breaking the ice. Squeeze just right, let the edges give, pull the paper down in one strip. Some bit straight through, others licked slow, letting the color stain their lips purple for hours. It was a childhood economy built on sugar, ice, and 5-cent packets, and every kid on the block knew exactly which house had the coldest cups. Before lunch, money was a guarantee. Syrup sandwiches filled the gap between hunger and the next real meal. 2 slices of white bread, a heavy pour of Cairo syrup or dark cane syrup, pressed together and wrapped in wax paper for school. The bread went soft and sticky within minutes, part of the appeal for little hands that liked pulling it apart in sweet, doughy strings. In the 1950s, a bottle of Cairo cost less than 20 cents and stretched across a week of snacks for 3 or 4 kids. Dark syrup carried a caramel note with a faint bitterness that balanced the sweetness. Light was milder, preferred by the younger ones. No one bragged about eating syrup sandwiches. It was the kind of snack made quietly on afternoons when the icebox held nothing else. But decades later, grown men and women speak of it with something close to reverence because that sandwich meant somebody made sure you didn't go without. Peanut butter and jelly on saltine crackers was what happened when the bread ran out, but hunger didn't. You spread peanut butter on one cracker, grape jelly on the other, pressed them together, and hoped it held. It rarely did. The saltine snapped under the weight, and you'd eat the whole thing in pieces, licking your fingers between bites. But the salt cut through the sweet jelly in a way soft bread never managed. In the 1960s, a box of saltines cost 15 cents and peanut butter ran about a quarter, making this one of the cheapest protein snacks a mother could stock. Kids ate these after school, before dinner, and sometimes instead of dinner when weeks ran long. Crackers stayed crisp for weeks. Peanut butter didn't need the icebox, and the jelly lasted until the jar was scraped clean with a spoon. Long before snacks came in plastic wrappers, they came from the same pot that fed the family. Crackling bread was born on hog killing day when families rendered lard from pork fat, and the crispy bits left behind, cracklings, were folded straight into cornbread batter. The cracklings gave the bread a crunch plain cornbread never had, little pockets of salt and pork fat that burst between your teeth. This wasn't something learned from a book. You stood next to whoever worked the stove, watching her crumble the cracklings with her fingers, judging the batter's thickness by sight. Through the 1940s and 50s, in the rural South, hog killing meant every part of the animal fed somebody, and crackling bread was how the smallest scraps ended up on the table tasting richer than anything store-bought. Kids tore off corners still warm from the cast iron, eating it plain or crumbled into Potlikker. The bread kept for days, growing denser with each one. Parched. Peanuts required nothing but raw peanuts, a cast iron skillet, and patience, which is why every grandmother made them differently. Some roasted them in the shell, shaking the pan every few minutes until the shells darkened and the kitchen filled with a warm, earthy scent that clung to the curtains. Others shelled them first, stirring the raw nuts dry with a pinch of salt until they turned golden and the oil released. The technique traces to West Africa, where groundnuts were roasted over open fire long before reaching the American South through the slave trade. By the 1950s, parched peanuts were common in black households across Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, where peanut farming shaped local economies for generations. George Washington, carver's work at Tuskegee, had elevated the peanut from livestock feed to kitchen staple decades earlier. You ate them warm, handful by handful, and the ones at the bottom of the bowl, the most roasted, the darkest, those were always the best. She never called it a recipe. Soft white bread, a thick spread of butter, and a generous shake of sugar pressed into the surface so it wouldn't fall off. That first bite was pure sweetness cut by the salt in the butter, the bread compressing under your teeth into something almost like cake. Across the 1950s and 60s, this was what mothers made when kids came in starving and dinner was still an hour away. No cooking, no planning, nothing that wasn't already on the counter. Some mothers sprinkled lightly, others buried the bread under a snowdrift of crystals that crunched with each bite. It was never served at gatherings, never mentioned proudly, but ask any black adult from that era and watch their face change. The memory isn't about the food, it's about hands moving fast between the counter and the table, making sure you had something sweet before the world asked anything else of you. Cornbread crumbled into a tall glass of cold buttermilk separated insiders from everybody else. If you knew, no explanation was needed. If you didn't, none would be enough. The cornbread had to be day old, fresh dissolved into mush instead of holding its crumble. You broke it into chunks, dropped them into the glass, poured cold buttermilk over the top, and ate it with a long spoon, chasing soaked pieces to the bottom. The tang of buttermilk against the grit of cornmeal was savory, sour, and oddly refreshing in the deep South heat. Some added a pinch of salt, others crumbled raw onion into the glass, which sounds wrong until you've tried it. Through the 1940s and 60s, this was an after-work snack for laborers and a between meals holdover for kids who couldn't wait for supper. It used yesterday's bread, needed no cooking, and the buttermilk was already in the icebox from that morning. Fried corn started with a sharp knife and an ear fresh from the garden. You held it upright on the cutting board and sliced downward, letting kernels fall, then scraped the cob with the back of the knife to release the milky starch that made everything come together. That starch thickened the corn as it hit the bacon grease, turning loose kernels into a creamy golden dish that tasted nothing like anything from a can. Salt, pepper, maybe a pinch of sugar if the corn wasn't sweet enough on its own. Through the 1950s and 60s, when gardens behind shotgun houses overflowed with Silver Queen and Country Gentleman varieties. Fried corn showed up daily from July through September. Kids ate it warm from the skillet, spooned onto bread, or straight from the pan, barefoot in kitchens where the window stayed open because there was no other way to breathe. The woman who made it best in your house never said what she added. After she stopped cooking, the corn never tasted that way again. But not every snack came from the stove. Some came from standing around the kitchen table with greased hands. Popcorn balls held together with dark molasses were a project that turned an ordinary evening into something worth keeping. Corn was popped on the stove in a heavy pot, shaken hard until it slowed, dumped into the biggest bowl in the house. Molasses, often sorghum-based in the deep south, where families pressed their own from tall cane stalks, melted with butter until it coated a spoon without sliding off. You had to work fast once it hit the popcorn, stirring and shaping balls with oiled hands before the syrup cooled and hardened. Kids stood around waiting for their turn, fingers sticky and shining. These showed up at Halloween when store-bought candy was beyond the budget, at church harvest festivals, and on cold nights when the house needed something sweet that cost almost nothing. The molasses gave them a smoky sweetness white sugar couldn't match. But what stayed in memory wasn't the taste. It was standing at that table together, laughing, hands greased and moving. Somewhere in the Mississippi Delta, probably in the late 1960s, somebody dropped a dill pickle into a jar of Kool-Aid and invented something no cookbook would ever claim. Koolickles were made by draining half the brine from a pickle jar, pouring in a packet of Kool-Aid mixed with a cup of sugar, sealing it, and letting it sit for a week. The pickles turned electric red or deep purple, absorbing sweetness while keeping their sour crunch. Sweet, salty, and tart together. It made no sense until it hit your tongue. They were sold at corner stores and school fundraisers across the Delta, fished from jars with tongs. Cherry and tropical punch were favorites, though grape had its loyalists. A quarter bought you one, and it delivered more flavor per bite than anything else behind that counter. It was backroad brilliance, born from boredom and fearless experimentation by people who never worried about what food was supposed to be. Homemade peanut brittle started with a heavy saucepan, raw peanuts, white sugar, and the kind of focus that didn't allow for conversation. Sugar went into the pot with corn syrup and water, heated until it hit what cookbooks call the hard crack stage, a term she never used because she judged it by color and by how the syrup behaved when dripped into cold water. Too early and the brittle stayed chewy, too late and it burned bitter. When the syrup turned amber, in went the peanuts, a pat of butter, and a pinch of baking soda that made the whole mixture foam and rise. Poured fast onto a greased cookie sheet and spread thin before it set. The brittle cooled into golden sheets that shattered when cracked against the counter. Through the 1940s and 50s, this was Christmas candy in black homes, wrapped in wax paper, packed in tins, given to neighbors and church members as gifts. You can buy a peanut brittle anywhere now. None of it cracks the way hers did. Watermelon rind pickles were a testament to the waste-nothing philosophy that defined African American cooking. After the sweet red flesh was eaten during hot reunion afternoons, the white and green rinds were saved and transformed into sweet, tangy pickles. Women soaked the rinds overnight in salt water to firm them, then simmered them in a syrup of vinegar, sugar, cinnamon, and cloves until translucent. The process took patience but cost nothing, since the rinds were kitchen scraps given new life. These pickles provided welcome contrast to heavy reunion foods, their sweet acidity cutting through plates of meat and gravy. Children often wrinkled their noses at first, but grew to love the unexpected sweetness hiding in those pale slices. Watermelon rind pickles represented the genius of turning would-be garbage into treasured food. Fried dough twists showed up wherever black communities gathered. Church carnivals, block parties, family cookouts, golden and glistening, dusted with cinnamon sugar while still hot enough to burn your tongue. The dough was simple: flour, sugar, a little milk, and a pinch of nutmeg, rolled into ropes and twisted before dropping into a pot of hot oil. They puffed and browned in seconds, rising to the surface with a crackle that told you they were done. The technique has cousins across the African diaspora: West African puff puff, Caribbean festival, Gula country beignets, all fried dough, all celebration food. In the 1950s and 60s, these were the snacks mothers made when company was coming or the church needed something for the bake sale table. Kids hovered around the stove, waiting for the first batch, knowing the ones straight from the oil, still soft in the middle and crunchy at the edges, were the best. Nobody measured the dough. You knead it until it felt right, and if it didn't puff in the oil, you added more milk and tried again. Sweet potato chips were homemade long before any bag of them sat on a grocery shelf. A raw sweet potato, peeled and sliced thin with a sharp knife, no mandolin, just steady hands, then fried in lard or vegetable oil until the edges curled and the centers crisped into something halfway between a chip and a cracker. Salt went on while they were still hot and shining with grease. The sweet potato's natural sugar caramelized in the oil, giving each chip a faint sweetness underneath the salt that store-bought versions have never managed to replicate. In the rural South, through the 1940s and 50s, sweet potatoes grew easily in poor soil and stored well through winter, making them one of the cheapest vegetables a family could keep. Slicing them into chips and frying a batch cost almost nothing and gave kids something crunchy to eat between meals. They disappeared from a plate faster than they came out of the oil. Most people today don't realize sweet potato chips started in home kitchens, not factories. Now, here's one that still makes people go quiet when they admit it out loud. A mayonnaise sandwich was exactly what it sounds like. White bread, a thick spread of mayonnaise, folded or pressed together and eaten without apology. There was no meat, no lettuce, no cheese, just mayo and bread. In the 1950s and 60s, when a family hit the last days before payday and the kitchen was stripped to its studs, mayonnaise sandwiches kept kids from going to bed empty. The jar sat in the icebox like a last resort that never judged you for needing it. Some added salt and pepper, some didn't bother. The taste was rich and bland at the same time, which is exactly what hunger made acceptable. Kids who grew up on mayonnaise sandwiches rarely talked about it then, and when they mention it now, there's usually a pause before a laugh. The kind of laugh that means you survived something you don't need to explain to anyone who was there. Every neighborhood had a corner store, and every corner store had a glass case near the register filled with penny candy that could make or break a kid's afternoon. You walked in with a nickel or a dime, pressed your face against the glass, and pointed. Now and laters, Mary Janes, squirrel nut zippers, atomic fireballs, bazooka Joe, and those strawberry hard candies with the soft center that nobody ever knew the real name of. The man behind the counter dropped your choices into a small brown paper bag and you carried it out like treasure. In the 1960s, black-owned corner stores were more than shops. They were neighborhood anchors where your mama had a tab, the owner knew your name, and you got sent home if you tried to buy candy before finishing your chores. The candy itself wasn't special, factory-made, waxy, overly sweet. But the ritual, the choosing, the counting, the walking home with that bag was everything. That glass case held more joy per square inch than anywhere else in a kid's world. Sugar water was the drink you made when there was nothing else to drink. A glass of tap water, 2 or 3 spoonfuls of white sugar, stirred until most of it dissolved. That was it. No flavor packet, no fruit, no ice if the tray was empty, just sweet water. In the hardest stretches of the 1950s and 60s, when Kool-Aid packets weren't in the budget and juice was out of the question, sugar water showed up in kitchens across the South and in the apartments of northern cities where Southern families had migrated, carrying nothing but habits and hunger. Kids drank it without complaint because it was cold and sweet and somebody had made it for them. That last part mattered more than the recipe. A mother stirring sugar into a glass of water for her child wasn't giving up, she was holding the line. And if you remember drinking sugar water as a kid, you probably also remember the exact kitchen where it happened and the hands that stirred it. Toast soaked with pet milk and sugar was a snack that smelled like warm vanilla and tasted like comfort made from almost nothing. Pet milk, evaporated milk in a small tin can, was a pantry staple in Black households through the 1940s and 60s because it didn't need refrigeration until open and cost less than fresh milk. You toasted bread until it was just firm, laid it flat on a plate, poured the thick, slightly sweet milk over it until the bread softened, then sprinkled sugar on top. The milk soaked in and the sugar melted into the warm surface, turning plain toast into something that felt like a treat. Some kids ate it with a fork. Others picked it up and let the milk run down their wrists. It was an after-school holdover, a cold morning, comfort, and sometimes the only thing between you and an empty stomach until supper. The woman who made it best never thought of it as cooking. She thought of it as keeping you fed. Deviled eggs appeared on every reunion table, their golden yellow filling piped neatly into white halves that disappeared within minutes. Women boiled dozens of eggs the night before, carefully peeling and slicing each one to remove the yolk for mashing. The filling combined yolks with mayonnaise, mustard, pickle juice, and paprika until smooth and tangy. Each half was topped with a sprinkle of paprika for color. Eggs cost almost nothing, yet these transformed versions looked elegant on serving platters lined with lettuce leaves. Children circled the table waiting for permission to grab one, while adults debated whose recipe was superior. Deviled eggs represented the art of making something fancy from humble ingredients. They traveled well and could be made days ahead without losing quality. Pig ear sandwiches came from butcher shops in Black neighborhoods where nothing from the animal went unclaimed. The ears were cleaned, boiled until tender, then sliced thin and dressed with vinegar, hot sauce, salt, and pepper. Eaten cold on white bread or sometimes on a bun, the texture was chewy and cartilaginous, not for everyone, but unmistakable once you developed the taste. In the 1950s and 60s, pig ears cost almost nothing at the butcher counter because most customers walked right past them. But in Black communities from Memphis to Chicago to Birmingham, they were a recognized delicacy with roots in the nose to tail eating that enslaved people had practiced for generations. Some shops sold them ready-made in styrofoam trays. Others let you pick your own from a jar of brine. Kids either loved them or refused to look at them. There was no middle ground. The ears had a gelatin richness that lingered, and anyone who ate them regularly could spot a good one by how it bent without snapping. If pig ear sandwiches tested your nerve, cracklings tested your loyalty to the old ways. Cracklings, not the puffed bagged pork rinds from the gas station, but the real ones pulled hot from a cast iron pot during hog killing season, were a completely different thing. The skin and fat were cut into chunks and rendered slowly in a large pot over an open fire or wood stove until the fat melted away and the remaining pieces turned golden, crunchy, and impossibly rich. You ate them hot, sprinkled with salt, standing outside near the pot because they never made it to the kitchen. Through the 1940s and 50s, Hog Killing Day was a community event in the rural South. Neighbors helped neighbors, and the cracklings were shared while the work continued. The crunch was louder than a potato chip, the fat coated your lips, and the pork flavor was concentrated into something you could taste for hours. Store-bought rinds are a ghost of this. The real ones died with the last generation that still kept hogs and still knew the fire. Sardines and crackers was a quiet snack. No ceremony, no cooking, no calling anyone to the table. Just a man sitting at the kitchen table after work, peeling back the tin lid with the key, laying the small silver fish on saltines one by one, maybe adding a drop of hot sauce or a squeeze of mustard. In black households through the 1950s and 60s, canned sardines were cheap, shelf-stable protein that didn't need refrigeration and lasted for months in the cabinet. A can cost a dime. Paired with crackers, it was a full snack for 15 cents. Fathers ate them, grandfathers ate them, and if you sat close enough, they'd hand you one on a cracker without saying a word, and you'd eat it because refusing meant missing the moment. The fish was salty and soft, the crackers dry and plain, and together they worked the way simple things do when nobody's trying to impress anyone. Sardines and crackers vanished from most tables when the men who ate them did. The sound gave it away, a thick slice of bologna hitting a hot skillet, the edges starting to curl almost immediately as the fat rendered and the center puffed into a dome. You pressed it flat with the spatula and it fought back, sizzling and popping, turning brown in patches until the whole slice was crisp at the edges and warm through the middle. Fried bologna on white bread with mustard was a weeknight snack, a Saturday lunch, and sometimes a meal that didn't need anything else beside it. In the 1960s, a pound of bologna cost about 35 cents, making it one of the cheapest meats in the store. You cut it thick. Thin slices were for sandwiches. That didn't know any better. The bread went soft under the warm meat, the mustard cut through the salt, and every kid who grew up eating it can still hear exactly what it sounded like when that first slice hit the pan. Some things stay in your ears longer than your mouth. Fried okra arrived at reunion tables in heaping mounds, each pod transformed from slimy vegetable into crispy golden nuggets that disappeared fast. Women sliced fresh okra into rounds, dredged them in seasoned cornmeal, and fried them in cast iron skillets filled with hot oil. The cornmeal coating turned crunchy while the okra inside became tender without the texture issues that made some people avoid it. Children who claimed to hate okra would devour the fried version, often not realizing what they were eating. The dish stretched garden abundance into celebration food. One bushel could feed dozens when transformed this way. Served hot with plenty of salt, fried okra disappeared almost as fast as it hit the table. Fried okra represented Southern ingenuity at its finest, turning humble vegetables into irresistible bites everyone loved. Jelly biscuits weren't made, they were assembled from whatever was left. A cold biscuit from that morning, split open with your thumb, spread with preserves put up the summer before. Blackberry, plum, fig, muscadine, whatever grew on the fence line or came from a neighbor's tree. The biscuit was dense and dry by afternoon, which was the point. It held the jelly without falling apart and gave you something to chew on that lasted. In the 1950s and 60s, putting up preserves was a yearly ritual in black households, and those jars lined pantry shelves like currency. A good jar of fig preserves could be traded, gifted, or saved for the preacher's visit. Kids knew which jars were off limits and which were fair game for afternoon snacking. The jelly soaked into the cold bread just enough to soften it, and you ate it over the sink so the drips didn't hit the floor. It wasn't a snack anyone planned, just what happened when a kid got hungry and knew where the jars were kept. Vienna sausages eaten cold from the can had a taste that kids either accepted without question or rejected on sight. The little pale sausages sat in broth inside a pull-top tin, and you ate them with your fingers or on saltines, sometimes with mustard, salty, soft, vaguely smoky, with a texture closer to a hot dog than anything else in the cabinet. A can cost under 15 cents in the 1960s and didn't need refrigeration, making it one of the easiest protein snacks a mother could stock. They showed up in lunch pails, on fishing trips, and in the back pockets of overalls. Nobody called them a delicacy, but they fed you when nothing else was ready, and they sat in the pantry like a quiet guarantee that nobody would go completely without. And then there were the snacks that separated the generations entirely. Hoghead cheese on crackers was an acquired taste most kids fought before surrendering to. The cheese wasn't cheese. It was a loaf made from simmered pig head meat, ears, and sometimes tongue, seasoned with vinegar, pepper, and sage, then set in its own gelatin until it firmed into a sliceable block. Cut thin and laid on a saltine, it was rich, tangy, and slightly jiggly, with a mouthfeel that took some getting used to. Hog killing season in the rural South, late November through December, produced head cheese because discarding any part of the animal was considered a kind of sin. Through the 1940s and 50s, it sat on kitchen counters in covered dishes, sliced as needed. The older folks ate it with hot sauce and didn't think twice. Kids watched from across the room, daring each other. The ones who tried usually came back for more. It faded when the last people who kept hogs stopped keeping them. Pork chops and cabbage proved Black mothers could make a dollar stretch further than anyone thought possible. Thick-cut chops were browned until they developed deep golden crust, then nestled into beds of sliced cabbage, onions, and carrots, seasoned with salt and smoked paprika. Everything simmered together in covered pots, the cabbage softening and sweetening as it absorbed rendered pork fat. The result was tender vegetables that tasted almost buttery despite having little added fat, surrounding chops that remained juicy from slow cooking. A head of cabbage cost nearly nothing and could feed an army when paired with meat. This dish appeared on tables throughout the week, reheated and somehow tasting even better as flavors continued developing overnight. It was poverty transformed into abundance through skill and patience. Dirty rice earned its name from the ground meat and chicken livers that gave it a speckled, earthy appearance no child could resist. Mothers would brown ground beef or pork with finely chopped livers, onions, celery, and bell peppers until the mixture was deeply savory. Rice was cooked separately, then folded into the meat mixture with Cajun seasonings that brought gentle heat and bold flavor. The dish stretched a small amount of meat across a large pot, making it economical enough for weekly suppers. Children who claimed to hate liver never suspected it was hidden in every delicious bite, and mothers kept that secret with knowing smiles. Dirty rice was Cajun tradition, adopted and adapted by Black families throughout Louisiana and beyond. It proved that the best flavors often came from the humblest ingredients.
Buttermilk cornbread sticks brought the smell of hot iron and sweet corn to countless African-American kitchens, where cast iron molds shaped each piece into crisp-edged fingers perfect for dipping. The batter of stone-ground cornmeal, tangy buttermilk, and a little lard was poured into sizzling molds so the edges crackled as soon as they touched the heat. Children loved pulling the golden sticks apart, steam rising as they slathered honey butter across the ridges. They were the ideal companion to collard greens or a simple bowl of beans, hearty enough to stand alone as a snack when money was scarce. Street vendors sold them wrapped in newspaper at church homecomings, and neighbors traded secrets about which cornmeal gave the best crunch. The sound of batter meeting hot iron became a music of its own, echoing through small kitchens on quiet evenings. Today, these molds often sit forgotten in cupboards, but a warm cornbread stick still delivers a taste of the past that is both humble and magnificent.
Fried pork chops with sawmill gravy was breakfast royalty in Black Southern households. Thin-cut chops were seasoned heavily with salt and pepper, dredged in flour, and fried until the coating turned crispy. The treasure came from what remained in the pan afterward. Mothers added flour to hot drippings, stirring until it browned slightly and smelled of toasted nuttiness. Milk was poured in slowly, whisked until it transformed into thick, peppery gravy. This gravy was ladled over chops and split biscuits, creating plates so rich that children cleaned every crumb. The combination of crispy pork, creamy gravy, and tender biscuits sustained workers through long mornings and gave children energy for school. It cost almost nothing, but delivered pure luxury that made ordinary mornings feel like celebrations. Butter rice with fried eggs was breakfast, lunch, and dinner, depending on what the family needed and what the pantry held. Mothers would cook rice until fluffy, then stir in generous amounts of butter until each grain glistened and carried that rich, creamy flavor. A fried egg was placed. On top is runny yolk breaking open to create a natural sauce that children mixed eagerly into the rice below. Some mothers added a splash of soy sauce or a sprinkle of black pepper for extra depth. This dish was the answer when money was tight but bellies needed filling, providing protein and carbohydrates in one inexpensive bowl. Children loved the ritual of breaking the yolk themselves, watching it flow golden across the butter-slicked grains. It was honest, humble food that required no pretense but delivered complete satisfaction.
Peanut brittle with sorghum was the kind of candy that snapped between your teeth and stuck in your memory long after the last piece was gone. Farm families boiled sorghum syrup until it bubbled thick and dark, its grassy sweetness richer than plain sugar. Roasted peanuts were stirred in quickly, the hot mixture poured across buttered pans and spread thin with the back of a spoon. Children waited wide-eyed as the candy cooled, eager to crack off shiny amber shards that caught the light like stained glass. Revival gatherings and county fairs always had a table piled high with these sweet, brittle sheets, often wrapped in wax paper tied with string. The sorghum not only gave a deeper flavor, but also reflected the ingenuity of cooks who relied on what they could grow rather than expensive, refined sugar. Each bite carried the flavor of late summer fields and long evenings under oil lamps. To taste it again would be to remember the easy companionship of neighbors sharing stories while the brittle snapped between happy hands.
Baked pork chops with rice was the weeknight miracle that freed mothers from standing over hot stoves while still delivering meals that tasted like hours of effort. Seasoned pork chops were laid over uncooked rice in a baking dish, then covered with cream of mushroom soup diluted with water. As the dish baked, the rice absorbed all the liquid and flavors from the meat, becoming tender and savory. The chops cooked to perfection on top, edges caramelized where they met the bubbling sauce. This one-dish meal meant fewer pots to wash and more time for helping with homework or other household tasks. Children loved the creamy rice that clung to the chops, and fathers appreciated coming home to hot meals requiring nothing more than setting the table. Efficiency and comfort married together in a single casserole. Tomato rice carried the bright tang of canned tomatoes mixed into fluffy grains, a dish that children either loved immediately or grew to crave. Mothers would saute onions in bacon grease until soft, then add canned tomatoes and let them break down into a fragrant sauce. Rice was stirred in and cooked slowly, absorbing every drop of that tangy, sweet liquid until each grain turned a beautiful sunset orange. Some families added sugar to balance acidity, while others preferred natural sharpness that cut through heavier dishes. It was often served alongside fried fish or pork chops, but children happily ate bowls of it alone. Tomato rice was inexpensive, using pantry staples that cost pennies but delivered comfort worth far more. This dish taught children that simple ingredients created memorable meals.
Hot water. Cornbread fritters were the quick answer to hunger when a hearty snack was needed before supper or after school. Cooks stirred boiling water into seasoned cornmeal, forming a thick dough that could be shaped into small patties with a spoon. Dropped into a skillet of hot bacon drippings, the fritters sizzled and browned within minutes, filling the room with a toasty aroma that made waiting difficult. The crust formed a crisp shell while the inside stayed tender and warm. Children often burned their fingers snatching them from the pan before they cooled, eager to taste the smoky corn flavor. These fritters paired perfectly with a drizzle of cane syrup or a slice of fresh tomato when gardens were plentiful. They proved that simple ingredients and a hot stove could create pure comfort faster than any fancy recipe. Today, the memory of that first crunchy bite still lives wherever people remember the sound of cornmeal meeting hot iron.
Smothered pork chops with onion gravy was the Sunday dinner that brought entire families rushing to the table before the blessing was finished. Black mothers seasoned bone-in chops with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, dredged them in flour, and browned them golden in cast iron. The magic came when sliced onions were added to the drippings and cooked until soft and sweet. Broth was poured in to create thick, savory gravy that bubbled as the chops simmered beneath it. The meat became so tender it fell off the bone, soaking up every drop of that silky sauce. Served over rice or mashed potatoes, this dish stretched one package of pork chops into a feast that fed six with seconds to spare. Children would sop up the last of the gravy with bread, unwilling to let a single drop go to waste. Hoppin John rice was more than food in African American households. It was tradition, luck, and heritage served in a single pot. Black-eyed peas simmered with ham hocks or bacon until tender, their cooking liquid becoming a rich, smoky broth. Rice was added directly to the pot, absorbing those flavors as it cooked until each grain was infused with the essence of pork and pepper. Mothers made this dish on New Year's Day for prosperity, but children begged for it year-round because the taste was simply irresistible. The peas were believed to represent coins, bringing fortune to those who ate them, but the real treasure was the flavor itself. Served with cornbread on the side, this was a complete meal that cost almost nothing to prepare. Hoppin John connected generations, carrying recipes passed down through oral tradition.
Molasses pull candy turned an ordinary evening into a celebration of sticky fun and family patience. Thick molasses was boiled until it reached a glossy stage, then poured onto buttered pans to cool just enough for handling. Children and adults buttered their hands and began the long, rhythmic process of pulling and folding the warm candy until it turned a light golden color and grew chewy. The sweet strands stretched like ribbons, twisting into shapes that hardened into bite-sized treats once cooled. Autumn was the favorite season for this ritual, when cool air helped the candy set and neighbors gathered for the show. The smell of molasses clung to clothing and hair, a sugary perfume that marked a good night well spent. Every piece carried a hint of smoke from the kettle and a memory of shared laughter. Modern kitchens rarely see such slow, hands-on candy making, but those who remember know the pull of tradition is as strong as the candy itself.
Pork chop and potato casserole was comfort food architecture, built layer by layer with simple ingredients that transformed into something extraordinary. Raw potato slices were arranged in greased baking dishes, seasoned, then topped with onions and pork chops. Cream of celery soup mixed with milk was poured over everything, creating sauce that bubbled and thickened as it baked. The potatoes cooked slowly in creamy liquid, becoming soft and infused with pork flavor, while the chops roasted until edges crisped. Families gathered as casseroles emerged from ovens, surfaces golden and bubbling with promise. Each serving contained perfectly cooked pork, tender potatoes, and rich sauce, tying everything together. This was the kind of meal that stretched 4 pork chops into dinner for 8, with potatoes making every portion feel generous. Rice and gravy was the ultimate weeknight rescue, a dish that turned leftover pan drippings into liquid gold poured over fluffy white rice. Black mothers knew nothing should be wasted after frying pork chops or chicken, so they added flour to the pan and stirred until browned. Milk or water was whisked in slowly, creating thick, savory gravy that bubbled while the rice steamed nearby. The combination was simple but satisfying, offering protein-rich flavor without requiring another piece of meat. Children loved how the gravy soaked into each grain, turning plain rice into something rich and comforting. This dish represented the resourcefulness of African American kitchens, where flavor was built from what others might discard. It was frugal cooking at its finest, proving that ingenuity mattered more than expensive ingredients. Those kitchens went quiet, but the taste never left. Drop your memory in the comments and subscribe before the next one's gone.